You know, when you meet a guest, a friend, somebody you get introduced to, and you feel like maybe you know them, or maybe you might want to know them. That's what I feel about this next guest. This is Rob Walling. He's a serial entrepreneur who has started 6 different companies, bootstrapped 5 of them, uh, which is an amazing thing. He's written 5 best-selling books about entrepreneurship, including the one we're talking about today, which is the SaaS Playbook, and another one called Start Small, Stay Small. But what's really interesting to me is being a podcaster, a business owner, and moving things as a creator, as the force behind all things. We're going to talk about those things, what lights us up when it comes to books, why do we do it? I'm so grateful to have Rob here. Thank you for being on the show.
It's amazing. Thanks for having me, Azul.
Yeah. So we were talking briefly right offline, and I started getting chills because I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't often have these conversations because people come on the show, rightfully so, to promote and share their book. I want them to. But when you meet someone who's willing to talk about the other stuff, the stuff that's underneath it, that's when I get really excited because there's something meaty, something different here. So let's talk about books before we dive into the other things. Because we were talking about the fact that you wrote these books in different ways. You wrote one in one way and then many in a different way. Let's talk about the writing process for you. What is it about writing a book about, I mean, SaaS is one thing, but writing books at all that gets you excited?
What gets me excited is that in our world today, most things are ephemeral, meaning they go away, they come and they go. Because social media, look, it's bullshit. Like it is.
Yeah.
And I'm on Twitter or X, or whatever we call it, because the startup space and I invest in startups and I started that. None of it's all meaningless compared to
Yeah.
books. And I realized this. I had a blog from 2005 to 2011, and it's at robwalling.com/essays, I think, or /blog. You can see the old essays. Um, and I started a podcast in 2010 called Startup for the Rest of Us. And I published a book that same year. My first one, Start Small, Stay Small, you reference. And nothing got me the notoriety that Start Small, Stay Small did. And Start Small, Stay Small it's a short book. It's 200 pages, like 40,000 words. It is a fraction of what I had blogged. It was already a fraction of the content I was putting on the podcast. I had a membership website for entrepreneurs that was doing 100,000, 150,000 a year, which for bootstrappers could pay all my bills. I had done all this stuff, and I self-published a book on Amazon CreateSpace back then, right before it was
Right.
Amazon KDP or whatever. And it sold, 500 copies in the first month, and then it just kept doing that. It got rolling, and it sold. How many has it sold now? Probably 35,000 copies in the past 15 years, maybe 40. So it's made some good money. I had no idea that people would be so drawn to a book that books still matter. And the
Yeah.
same thing with SaaS Playbook. People buy it and read it, and it's like all the stuff that I've done in my life. Like you said, started 6 companies, 5 of them bootstrapped. I'm in certain circles, I'm most famous for these books. And to me, it's just a side, it's a side thing. It's a thing I do in addition to starting companies and investing. But a lot of people, think that that's those are my masterworks. And so that's why I'm excited about books, because they are still so powerful,
Yeah.
and they last, they stick around. Start Small, Stay Small still sells tens of thousands of dollars worth of money. It puts tens of thousands of money into my pocket every year. And it's a 15-year-old book. And I don't do it for the money, but that just
Yeah.
goes to show you that there's value being created there.
Yeah. So how did you know? Let's talk about the book specifically that you just referenced, because I
Mhm.
think Start Small, Stay Small was solving some sort of challenge or issue or thing that people were having. How did you decide this was the one? Because if you've been writing about it for a while and you had a lot more content you could have put in there, why that one? Why do you think that one was maybe a zeitgeist as far
Mm,
as that
yeah.
genre goes?
I was the first to the niche of developers wanting to start startups. There was a couple blogs about it, but no one had written a book that was any good. And I had read all of them. And you've heard the term hate watching. Like, I'm going to hate watch this Netflix show. Sometimes I hate write books in terms of, I didn't really want to write a book, but I hated all the other books in the space. They were so bad. Either I don't know if they were ghostwritten, and not that that makes them bad, but they were poorly ghostwritten. How about that? Or they were people who had done it once and gotten lucky. And so then they write from their experience. And I'm like, none of this makes sense. Or none of it was tactical. And
Yeah.
so I was getting the same questions over and over, because I was just sharing my journey as a developer turned entrepreneur. I was getting a lot of the same questions. And that is having that audience interaction is what shaped what's in Start Small, Stay Small.
Yeah. For someone out there who's really new on their journey, because that was pretty early on in your journey,
Mhm. Yep.
who has resistance to this idea that they might have something to say, what would you say to them? Because, I mean, they're like, I don't know if this is going to mean anything or matter.
Mm,
How did you decide that it would?
I decided because I didn't decide that in my mom's basement or in a vacuum. I decided it based on real people telling me these things by emailing me, posting comments on my blog, because this was before, Twitter was what, 08, 09, and I wrote the book in 2010. So it was like not really a thing yet. Um, It was real interactions with real people, mostly online, saying, "This essay was really good." I would write high-level essays about software entrepreneurship, and they're like, "But I wanna know how you're doing it. I wanna know the nuts and bolts. I wanna know the tactics. I want" And so that encouraged me to be like, "Well, I think there's some demand for this." And then what I did not go and write a book. I put a landing page up, and all it was a headline and a one sentence after that, and it said something. I still have a picture of it, so like a screenshot of it somewhere, but it said, "Finally, a book written for people who wanna start a startup and don't have venture capitalists depositing millions of dollars into their bank account. I wanna teach you how to bootstrap a software company," or something like that. Like, that was it. That was all the copy on the entire page, and then it said, "Opt in to learn more. This is Rob Walling. Here's my blog." And I got like 500 emails over the course of a few months. And it was from my audience and it was from people talking about it. And then it made it onto Hacker News and people were like, wow, this is interesting. It's a book about bootstrapping. No one's done that. And so that was then I went back and I started combing through my old writings and stuff and trying to, and most of the stuff in Start Small, Stay Small is brand new writing, but that was impetus to be like, I think this will sell a few hundred copies. And that was my initial goal. I thought if I sold like 300 copies of the book, I was like, it'll be worth it.
Yeah. Well, what's really interesting, I hope you're listening and paying attention if you're watching either way, but putting a landing page with your idea is a great way to validate it and creating content. You were creating content already. It wasn't that
Yeah,
you wrote a book as your first content. I don't think there's anything
correct.
wrong with that. I'm not going to believe that you can't write amazing things. Maybe you've been doing stuff for 20 years and this is useful, but it seems like validation is really important, especially one, if you're a SaaS developer, but
Mhm,
if you're a book writer as well. Um, I know that early on you started with very creative pursuits that weren't necessarily this a punk
mhm,
band, music.
mhm.
Tell us what writing or creativity is doing for you, because I mean, if I look from the outside in, I would think SaaS. I don't know, is that creative? Like, I know there's creativity
Mhm.
in it, but like it seems the function of it, majority might seem very technical and not so creative. What do you
Yeah.
say to that when we talk about books and creativity?
Yeah, that's a really good question. From that when I was in grammar school and junior high, I wrote fiction, like a lot. I read a lot of fiction, then I wrote a lot of fiction, and I won a couple competitions, just little local things, no big deal, but I really enjoyed that creativity, and then college, I picked up the guitar, played in bands, as you said. I think, I feel like my content, whether it's my podcast, YouTube, books, it really seems to resonate with people, and there's a reason I'm still doing it is because it seems to be successful, and I think that's because I'm not there are, like, startup founders who are like, "Well, I gotta create content because that's what people do." I came at it the other way where I was like, "I have to create stuff." Content, we'll call it. I don't love that term, but I have to create content from day one. Like, I was working a full-time salary day job and I was blogging because I was like, I just have to. I have to put stuff into the world. Doing things in public is interesting to me. And so that is why write 5 books? Do you need to write that many? And it's like, because I just keep having things to say. Same reason why I
Yeah,
put out 800 podcast episodes. I'm about to hit number 800 next month. And it's because I just keep having things to say. And so to answer your question though, more directly about, is SaaS creative? It is and it isn't, but it is what you make of it.
yeah,
You could ask like, is writing a nonfiction book about SaaS very creative? It can be. I feel like I really scratch the itch. For me, creativity is like the blank slate and like putting something that I'm super fucking proud of into the world. And hopefully other people, it resonates with them as well. I do care what people think. I know there's some people that are like, I'm going to create my art and it's for me. And that's okay too. I tend to want people to consume it. And so I want as many people to consume it and get value from it as possible. So as a result, I want it to be good and well received because that means more people will talk about it and more people will do it. So with SaaS, like starting SaaS companies, we were pretty creative. Like to design, if you go back to the last SaaS I started, which was called Drip, It still exists. I just sold it 10 years ago. It the user interface and the user experience and a lot of our marketing was very different than everyone else was doing, because I came at it, tried to approach it from first principles, and my co-founder was also very designer, he's a designer. So yeah, there is some creativity in it. A lot of the nuts and bolts underneath, you're right, is just like, it's some code that does some stuff. But like our homepage was like a long form sales letter, and the headline was, "Finally, lightweight marketing automation that doesn't suck." That was my headline that I wrote. And to me, that's pretty fucking creative, because all the
Yeah.
other headlines, what all our we had hundreds of competitors. Their headlines were all like, "Email marketing automation for the right, for this decade," and whatever else boring ass headline you could think of. I
Yeah.
was always trying to be like, MailChimp is similar, right? When Ben Chestnut was still there, he's a designer, very creative. He infused a lot of his creativity into his company as well.
Yeah. I love that. I find that the creative itch is what makes it possible to show up every day. I mean, honestly, because I don't know if you have pitches into your inbox about guests or topics.
A lot.
Uh,
Yep.
I think when I early on, I said yes to lots of people, and then
Mm.
I started my let's talk about creativity as it relates to books. I started my podcast in 2017 because I really wanted to talk to Gay Hendricks, the author of The Big Leap. That was it. I wanted to be very good from episode one. I didn't want to be stumbling around, not because I had some vanity about it, because the goal was to attract a New York Times bestselling author who had been on 2,500 different pieces of media, for him to say yes. So I studied and I did my best. The creative part was finding interesting things to talk about with people on books that I either didn't necessarily like or didn't know about the topic, or I was pushing beyond my comfort zone if we're talking about something that was out of my realm. So I had to be interested and curious, which was the creative part for me. It wasn't reading the book and the words. I was like, I'm interested in this human. I'm interested in what this person does to live. Why are they here with me? So I find it curious because I rarely get an invitation from another podcaster who invites them on a show to ask, hey, could I come on your show? And I was like, wow, I'm intrigued. One, that you would ask. And two, because I felt a sense of this is going to be an interesting show because you're intrigued, I'm intrigued, and I want to be totally enamored with the idea that we would have a deep conversation about whatever it was. I didn't know what it'd be, but I could sense that from your, hey, look, this may not be interest to you. I heard this. So tell me a little bit more why that sort of spark happened for you, because on my end, it was immediate. I was like, yes.
Yep.
I didn't even look at your credentials. I just thought it was interesting that you responded to a podcast episode. Tell,
Yeah. I listened to your episode with Dan Andrews, and Dan and I have known each other for not quite 20 years, maybe 15, 16. He's one of the very few entrepreneur podcasts that is running longer than mine. So I'm always like, you guys, I think he started in 2009 and we started in 2010. And I heard that episode, and you know what? I loved hearing that side of Dan because he's such a creative entrepreneur.
yeah,
And I thought to myself, I really want to have a conversation like that on the record, because I go on, I probably have not been on 2,500 pieces of media, but if you include my own, yeah, I've been on 2,500, because I have more than 1,000 podcast episodes between things. But other people's media I've been on interviewed at least 500 times. But
yeah,
so much of it is about startups, and which is fine. It's my day job.
yeah,
But truly, what makes me happy, you know what I do when I turn off this camera and I go sit downstairs? I pick up my guitar and I strum old songs that I used to write. Or I will, go with my kid and we'll play a tabletop game that involves like quite a bit of creativity. And like, that's the stuff that I do. I create first.
yeah.
That's actually my first tattoo here on my wrist, just says create. It was the
I
very
love
first one
that.
I ever got, because that's really at my core who I am. I have channeled. I was in bands like you mentioned, and I realized, boy, I'm sure not going to make it as a musician. Like, I'm not going to be a professional musician. I'm just not, and I don't have the voice, don't have it. I'm fine. I can play songs, but I started channeling that creativity into entrepreneurship. And
Yeah.
like, how can I have a great life and have the freedom to work on and do and create whatever I want? Well, I need to probably start my own company then. And maybe I need to sell it for enough money that I don't have to work for other people. That became the process. So, but to come back to your original question, why did I pitch you? Why did I email you when I get, I get, what do we get? 20 pitches a day, maybe? I don't know what you
Yeah.
get. Um, And why did I reach out? Is because I was like, that sounds like a fun conversation, and it's going to talk about stuff that I just never get to talk about on camera or on the mic, and I really do enjoy sharing that side of myself.
Yeah. I I'm curious about your fiction writing as a child. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason I'm curious is, to me, that's where creators either were birthed or held back, or a combination of those things. What were the stories you were writing uh about? Like, what were the topics? What was the genre? What drew you to them? And um do they still call you now?
Oh, that's interesting. I have not written fiction since high school. I was
Mm,
probably 15. Yeah, and I stopped. And what happened there was girls, sports, even academics. Like I wanted to get straight A's. I was I'm an achiever. That's how I was raised.
yeah.
So writing does not call me. Eventually switched that when I started playing the guitar. I was like, oh, writing music. That's my new creative outlet. But honestly, writing books, even though they're nonfiction and about business, still creative. My YouTube channel, 26 YouTube videos a year, creative 52. I love my podcast because I just get to show up and like talk about usually whatever I want. Sometimes interviews are less creative for me, because it's
Yeah.
like, I'm telling their story. And if it's a good one, it's cool. But like, that there's a little
Yeah.
less wandery that you can achieve. Um, but I still really enjoy, that's what calls me now, is just putting things into the world and letting people consume it.
Yeah. I coach a creative group that has nothing to do with books, which is interesting for me. They're creatives. They might be actors, comedians, performers, musicians in some way, or magicians or DJs. It's an interesting group to coach because they tend to do their art by themselves. So my job is to help them get more out of their creativity than just the work. And one of the things we talk about is, when you lean into this creative part of you, you're actually fulfilling your purpose, which is to be you. There's nothing else you're supposed to be doing, in my opinion, with this
Yeah.
life, but be you and express it however that comes out, and not to judge it or not to think it's wrong. And I think, unfortunately, because I was an educator for 25 years, that schools really crush the spirit of creativity in children and hold them to a bigger notion, like
Hmm.
college or a
Hmm.
future out there.
Hmm.
Um, how are you using creativity as you shape and share with your children about your early life, or how you want to see them foster creativity in their life as they are
Mm.
growing? Because I don't think my parents necessarily dampened my creativity, but they weren't necessarily creative people out.
Mm-mm.
So how does that go about for you?
I think it's I think they've seen, so I've written 5 books. My wife has written 3. Also most of it entrepreneurship as well, although from a different angle. She's a psychologist and a founder coach. They have seen when one of them was 7 and they wrote their first little book and published it on Amazon Kindle about Minecraft, Parents Guide to Minecraft. And the other wrote theirs when they were like 8 or 9. So they immediately saw, I remember telling them like, hey, so you're in this family. What we do, so there's things we do in this family. We all play instruments. That's just what you're going to do from the time one started playing when they were 3 and the other started playing when they were 4. They played the cello and the violin. And that's just an expectation. It was never a question. The other thing is I told them, yeah, you know what else we do in this family? We write books. And you don't even have to publish your book, but I'll help you put it together. Write your stuff and let's get it done. And so I think it's more of an expectation of this is kind of how we live our life. You know, I think the other thing is in problem solving. Like one of the things that has helped me the most
Mm,
as an entrepreneur, like where have you been creative? I'll tell you where I was creative when I was entering a space of email service providers, right? So I have this ESP that we built, competing with MailChimp and HubSpot, and they had cajillions of dollars and I had none. So I had to be pretty damn creative to get any type of traction. And so just problem solving that, and figuring out how do I hire people when I really don't have much money? Well, problem solve that. So I've modeled that to our kid. My wife and I both have modeled that to our kids. If they get in a
yeah.
conundrum where it's like, you don't just look around and say, what is someone telling me to do? Or what's the obvious choice? Let's really look at, there's usually a
Mm,
lot of different options if you're in a situation. Let's get creative with those.
yeah.
Those are probably the main ways.
Yeah. That's fantastic. I think, as we wander into this idea of books, we talked about a little bit offline. What do you see how the future of AI is doing to to your industry, perhaps, and then maybe even what you think it might be doing to books or the idea of information that's put out there,
Mm,
and how might creative people keep their voice or their authenticity in a time where everything seems to be generative?
yeah. Yeah, those are both good questions. I mean, it's there's in terms of like startups, SaaS companies, and investment and all that, it's changing a lot, but it's changing a lot, and also the old fundamentals still apply. Meaning, it's still about being a good at like executing well, and whether that means building a great product and marketing it well. AI is an augmentation. It gets you there faster. It can probably get you there with fewer people than a year ago, but it's it's not right. Contrary to popular belief, developers are not going away. It's not going to write all the code. I mean, maybe 10 years from now, but it's not even close right now to be able to do it well. And I guess I would say that's similar with maybe the publishing or the book industry. It's like now is the time where if you're kind of a semi-anonymous person cranking out content, AI is going to be able to do that better and better and better as the years go on. I think it's the time to embrace who you are, like your name, and build I hate the, personal brand or whatever, but it's like there's a reason that when I publish my next book, people will give me the benefit of the doubt and buy it is because I'm attached to it and they know me and they trust that I put out good stuff. And so
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of kind of anonymous nonfiction where it's like, hey, this is a cookbook, for example. Will AI be able to do that as good as humans in the next 5 years? It kind of might. So I think a lot of the books that are at least going to get a shot, that initial shot, are ones that from authors we know, from authors we respect, and from authors who have built the trust of an audience, and whether that's on social media or blogging, or if you have a podcast or YouTube, however it is you get out there. And I know this sucks because none of us want to be, I don't want to be on social media. I'm on it out of necessity, because it's part of my career. Um, but that's how I think it's going to change. People are also going to be, consumers and such are also going to be more aware of reading things and being like, is this AI? Did you use AI? Is AI right? But that's maybe a whole other topic.
yeah, and I think I want to come back to this idea you had with your children because I was thinking about this. Is I started my publishing career with children. I didn't. I was working as a teacher after being a principal for many years. I'm like, that's not for me. I like the kids. Went back to the classroom, and I thought, well, why don't we just make it stop teaching kids to write? What a waste of time. If in eighth grade they don't know how to write, it's not because of it's because they don't want to. So could we make every one of our seventh and eighth graders published authors? What if they're
Mhm,
all published? It was
mhm,
when Create Space was just opening up,
mhm,
like you, and it's probably 2007. That's what I did. It's like every one of my students become published authors. So I didn't teach writing or grammar or anything. I ran my classroom like a publishing house where
mm,
we had meetings, publishing meetings with each other, these
mm,
kids.
mhm,
If there was a need for a creativity boost because they were struggling, if I wanted to teach them some lessons I was learning,
mhm,
it changed everything. There was no more work to be done. It was all exciting and interesting because I didn't choose the topics they did. They wrote about what they wanted. They wrote as long as they wanted, as short as they wanted. And I found the liberation for me being the creator of that space started to
mhm,
generate something in me that I started to give myself permission to want to write. And I don't
mhm,
know that was really what got me to write a book was a kid. And
mhm,
I wasn't intending to. I was thinking I would be nice, but it's been 25 years since I was thinking that would be a good idea.
mhm,
And we were having this book fair with their books, and other classrooms would come to read the books, and they'd kind of move through the different publications. And one of the students said, "Hey, where's your book?" And when I said I didn't have one, it was this naive sort of sense of like, "Well, why don't you? Could you tell us? I guess we could do anything." I said, I'm
mhm,
afraid I won't have anything to say." He says,
mhm,
"Well, you tell us. If you write it, you will know." I was like, "Okay."
mm,
Powerful words from a kid. So I wrote that book in 30 days because it had been sitting in me for 24 years. It wasn't like I had just thought about it then. It was,
mhm,
I'm waiting for some permission that I've been telling the kids not to have. And this little child
mhm,
helped unlock this for me. And that's where I started finding my voice again. And I think that's what I felt when I was reading your book. I was like, I, I, I wonder, could I start a SaaS company? I'm like, wait, I don't want to start, but I felt that urge, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh crap, he's doing it to me. It's ninja
It's
ways.
like hypnosis or something,
Yeah.
incepting
Oh.
ideas, which I don't do intentionally, but apparently people tell me that like I inspire, that like the way I talk about things excites them. And they're like, you have
Mhm.
vision for stuff. And it's like, I'm just talking about things I know, but I guess it comes across that way, right?
Yeah. I think it's the confident, commanding sense that this matters and it doesn't, all at the same time.
Mhm. Hmm.
I don't know if I said that right, but that's how I felt. I was like, this is not someone taking this too serious, like trying to promote who he is or sell who he is. He's just telling what he knows, and this is
Mm,
honest. And so I felt like both liberated and drawn in. And I think
mm,
that's the authenticity, that the part about you that I sensed in your book. Even if some of the book was written with others helping you or all those things, I still sense that really
mm,
deeply.
mhm.
And one, I want to thank you and appreciate you for that, because it's not true. You read a lot of books, you're like, this could have been a blog post. Why is
Yeah.
this a book?
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for that. But I would love to know, is there a fiction book in you now?
I don't, I don't know. Probably not. Is kind of how it feels. I just don't know that I have a story to tell. If I was inspired to tell a story, I would do it. There's something about, if I were going to be like really dip back into creative, I would probably write songs. I haven't written a song in 20 years
Yeah.
or maybe like 22 years. And I started writing a song last week and I haven't, and I'm really rusty and it's not very good and blah, blah, blah. But like that is what draws me. And that's my true
Uh,
creativity. I see, here's the thing that I balance, like creativity is important to me, but equally as important is that what I create is consumed by a lot of people and impacts a lot of people. And so for me to try to justify to myself, I'm going to go write fiction. I can't count on that second thing happening because I'm probably not going to be very good at it because I haven't done it since I was 15. And B, I don't have an audience in that, but I can easily justify another book about SaaS. And in fact, I've
yeah.
written a sixth book called The SaaS Launchpad, and
Amazing.
it's already done, and mostly done. That I can easily justify because I know it's not as we say it's not as creative as fiction, but I know that it will sell probably tens of thousands of copies, and people will email me with the "You've changed my life. This thing changed." Like I get that from SaaS Playbook and Start Small, Stay Small about how I open their eyes. Kind of like you said, like I could start a SaaS. I get a lot of people that then go do it, and then like it changes their life because they can be digital nomads or they sell for $8 million, and then there was some developer working at a company before they read my book. It's like that really that feedback loop really inspires me to continue uh, creating in the way that I'm doing now.
So your creativity really is tied to the relationship you have with the consumer, the audience, the person
Yeah,
who's feeling it. Maybe it comes from the
yeah,
band days where
yeah,
performing is its own reward, because you're like,
yep,
ah, you can't even describe to someone else who's never done that to know why it's so rewarding.
yeah,
So I understand what you're saying. And the reason I ask that is there's no need to write fiction. I'm not trying to persuade you to. What
yeah,
I notice is that creativity has a way of coming from a creator no matter what they're doing. So,
yeah,
like you said, I think your blog post, your writing, your probably the way in which you developed Drip and other companies, you're like, I could be creative here. I know I can.
yep,
Um,
yep.
I had one of the founders of not the founders, marketers for the app Calm, the Calm
Mm-hmm.
app. And it
Yep.
was so interesting. He goes, that there were 2,000 meditation apps being launched, and we were just one of the many. But it was the story they told that changed everything. And that interested me. I'm like, oh, even a brand was using storytelling, which is
Mm-hmm.
my jam. Books, whatever it is, I love storytelling. In fact, I love the moth. I love the stage. I love that
Mm-hmm.
feeling of the reciprocation when you move someone's heart and you get to see it happen. Um, how will you use these books to move forward? Because you're not doing it because you need the money. You're doing it because you care. You're excited. You're interested. Is it? I'm glad to hear you're writing songs. That's awesome. Has it pushed you in any new ways that you weren't expecting for your creativity to show up after writing books and realizing there's something special about the long-term benefits and effects that a book has?
I think it's pushed. I mean, writing books is really hard. It's one of the harder things that I do because when I put out a podcast, I sit down, I talk for 30 minutes, and then it shows up on the internet and is listened to by tens of thousands of people 14 days later. That is a great feedback loop for me. Number one, 30 minutes of effort. Number two, tens of thousands of people. Number three, 14 days. All those three of those things are great. You know what a book
Yeah.
is? A book is me for hundreds and hundreds, if not more hours into a thing that will, I do think tens of thousands will read most of my books, assuming I'm on point with them. But that third part is, but they won't read it for 2 years. And that's agonizing for me because I do not get the
Yeah.
dopamine. I do not get the feedback. As I've already said, people consuming, reading, and feedbacking and telling me, hey, this is good, this isn't, or I have thoughts about that is such part of the excitement. And books are painful because it takes 2+ years to write it and get it out there. So to answer your question, what I think books have done is how they've pushed me creatively is to say, even though they are one of the worst things that you do to yourself in your professional life, keep writing them. Keep writing them. I've done 5 now that
Yeah.
has pushed me. That every one of them is a push. And in fact, the last one, or not the last one, was Exit Strategy about selling companies, but SaaS Playbook, which I guess when did that come out? 2022, maybe 22 or 23. I was thinking about it for a long time and I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And I was like, can't do it. Had ideas, had an outline, and a good friend of mine who I've known forever, like 15, 20 years, entrepreneur. He's like, what he finally convinced me is he said, you should really write this book. And he's like, tell me what you would put in it, right? Which he knew the moment I started talking about it. It's like, oh, I'm doomed because I'm going to get excited. And then he said, you know what? Our space, like the Bootstrapped startup space, really needs a book like this because
Mm.
none of the others are any good. And that was it. And I was like, oh no,
You did
you
it to
basically
me.
guilted me. And I literally started writing the next day because he was
Yeah.
right. And he's like, what other books are out there for your people? Like the entire audience I have, 125,000 people across YouTube and podcasts and books and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, what other book would you recommend? The one book you'd recommend to your audience today? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, you need to write it. And I was like, gosh, dang it. So I did.
Yeah.
And it is painful. So that's how it's pushed me is to do things that I don't really want to go through the pain of it. But once it's done, it has always been worth it.
Yeah. Books, I tell people the reason there's so much resistance in books, maybe not in the same way for you, is that there's a belief about what a book is and who writes books.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yep.
for centuries, we 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 knew what books were. We there's people out there still not sure that they're using AI or not, even though they're on their iPhone. I'm like, well, you kind of been using it for like,
Yeah.
but books have a really clear legacy and history. And I just picked up Walden and been reading that book. I was like, this is magical. This is like, wow. And the fact that they're still in this era banning books tells you the power of the human word, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm encouraged that you're still writing it. And I'm encouraged that you're writing it your way. There's people out there trying to make books a product, which is fine. It is a product. It's sold and exchanged. But I have a deeper feeling that books are more than that. The message is worth more than the information. And that's why I don't think AI will ever win, because the movement within you to do the thing, like you said, I knew I had to, because that thing, that message is what a book's about, because it will get talked about more than, did you read chapter this, page of this? No, it's like, it made me feel like I can do it. And I did.
Yeah.
That is incredible. Like you said, it's an incredible feeling. I can't imagine getting these emails from people saying you changed my life and their family's lives potentially forever.
Yeah. It's a big
And
deal.
that's
I
really
save all of
rewarding.
those. I save all
Yeah.
of those emails. They're very
As you
meaningful.
should. What do you think the shift might be? Not that you would necessarily have to have an answer, in the publishing world with all this AI and this shifting movement. Are people still calling for books, wanting books? Or are they just
Mm-hmm.
wanting information?
I mean, everyone I hang out with still reads books. It's the recommendation. And they'll often, I run this accelerator, Tiny Seed, and new founders start, and we'll start giving them advice about hiring or about marketing or about talking to customers. And we can recommend a blog post, we can recommend a YouTube video, but you know what we really recommend the most is books. And once
Yeah.
people they could take basically the same ideas and concepts, that were in a few YouTube videos and put them in a book. And it could be a short book that's 50 pages. And if it's good, we recommend it. And so it's so weird to think that obviously books 500 years ago, were a big leather tome, handmade, and the books we get now, the print on demand, even print on demand hardcovers now, like it's
Yeah.
incredible. And then Kindle books and Audible, like I have 921 books in my Audible account. I mostly consume audio. That's still a book. It's
Yeah.
still a book because I also consume podcasts and they're different. Podcasts are not books and books are not podcasts. And for whatever reason, we've decided that this form factor of a book is a complete idea, and it can be short. I think of audio. I mean, the shortest audiobooks I've ever read, that are not for kids, are maybe 2 hours, and the longest, was Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which is 57 hours. That those are both books, the 2-hour book and the 57-hour one, but they, obviously Rise and Fall of the Third Reich tells the whole story of World War II. And the 2-hour book was probably some marketing thing about a specific idea and implement, how to do this and that. How does that go away? How does that go
Yeah.
away? And in fact, how does that not become even more popular? Like, of all the content I put out so much content. I've spoken, someone went and wanted to create an AI bot of me. And so they went and scraped my podcast and YouTube channel. And he's like, do you know you've spoken like 1.5 million words in the past 15 years? And I was like, no, but I've said all that. And you know what? When I publish a book, it still sells. SaaS Playbooks just crossed 45,000 copies or something. Like, why wouldn't people just do all the free stuff that I put out? Because books. That's it.
Yeah.
Books, period. They just there's a cachet. I'm self-published, which means I could have published them and sold 1 copy each, right? It used to be called
Yeah.
Vanity Press. No one cares that I self-publish. It is, as I think these days, it is about as prestigious as going through a normal publisher. Now, New York Times, there's still bestseller lists and stuff. We know they can be gamed, blah, blah, blah. I think there is some prestige there that's waning. But all that said, the form factor of a book is as popular, at least in my circles, right? I run in the startup circles with founders and investors and developers. Book, and you would think that we would be at a cutting edge or a bleeding edge of like, we're leaving old stuff behind, and yet they still buy. I think 40 or 50% of my sales, probably 40% of my book sales, are still in physical form. They want physical copies of it. I don't even do physical copies anymore of anything
Yeah.
except for I do Audible. But again, think about all my software engineering people around the world. They're the ones, don't you think they'd be doing Kindles and they'd be using AI to blah, blah, whatever? They want physical copies. It's just not, there's something in us that's like deeply ingrained.
Yeah. 100%. And I think that's, if you're listening or watching, I want you to know that trends and this and that, what you hear people who are selling stuff to you or trying to say, may or may not be reading the book or reading books. They're just selling you the product. Be aware. And also know that if you're curious of whether or not a book makes a difference, try either reading one every day or every week, or taking one with you if you like the physical form, and just see what happens to your life with it.
Do it
I
instead
tried
of
it.
social media.
Yes.
Anytime try going to do Twitter, freaking open a book instead. It will, as you just said, it will completely change your outlook.
Completely. I mean, and I read lots of books. The quality of them isn't as important to me as I'm looking for something. I'm like, there's something in here. Maybe it's just a nuance. Maybe it's just, oh, that's not the way I will do that if I write a book like that. But what I learned from them, because I read a book a week, is at least, and what I notice is I start to change from reading books. Like I start to challenge my own thinking. What book, maybe there's not one single book, maybe there's a couple. What books have done that for you, whether fiction, nonfiction, has shifted the way you see the world? You talked about a short book. I'll go first because it's only fair to give you a second to think. Is, for me, Stillness Speaks by Eckhart Tolle is a short book. It's 2 hours Audible. But Stillness Speaks the title in itself communicates the entirety of the book.
Mm,
And I don't need to read it, but to know what it is. I'm not reading it to know what it is. I'm reading it to embody the message. And
mm,
the act of reading it lets the message me slow down, that there's no thing out there entering my field except for that book in that moment.
mm, mhm.
That's why I read that book, and I read it over and over, and I'll put it down, and I won't read it for a while, pick it back up. So what book is it for you that might stir you or push you or challenge you, or that you find yourself gravitating towards more
Mm.
often?
I like this question, actually. I think there's a bunch, obviously. I mean, I literally have 924 apparently in my Audible account, so it's hard to limit. But I will say two. There's one I read recently, and then there's one I read 15 years ago that completely just, well, like really shifted my entrepreneurial career. The one I read recently is called This Naked Mind,
Mm,
and it's about alcohol. And it is about how bad it is for us and how we all drink it casually. And I am an adult. I'm a social drinker and I enjoy alcohol. But like listening through it, I was like, oh, I really need to. It makes you rethink a lot of things that we just don't think about,
mm,
And even as of 15 years ago, it's like alcohol's it's always legal, and all these other drugs are illegal. And if you look at the actual health effects, now there are some drugs that are addictive, but there's a lot that are not. Let's say cannabis, THC, that is so much better for you than alcohol, like in all the ways, right? So it made me rethink, like, I really need to think before I take a drink. I think I need to think before I order
mm,
that second one. If I go out to dinner get a burger and stuff, it's like two old fashions. Of course, that's great. It gets, I feel good. I'm really questioning the
all
wisdom
right.
of that decision over the long term. I'm perfectly healthy, I don't have any issues, but it's like, man, this shit's not good for you. So that was one. But the other one that I think I listened to back in probably '09 or 2010 is Snowball. The Snowball by it's the biography of Warren Buffett.
Mm,
And it was right at a time where I had enough money coming from my products, like software products, as before or as I was writing my first book. But it was from software products. I could live on it. I was making like 150 grand a year. It was great. And we live in California. Um, but I was really bored. I was
mm,
working like 8 hours. I kind of had the 4 hour work week almost. So I had about 8 or 10 hours a week that I was working. And I remember feeling this unease of like, but I thought this is what I wanted. Isn't this what
mm,
I always wanted? And I'm still unhappy. And I was having a problem with it. And then I listened to the Snowball, and it just showed me how he compounded year after year after year after year, and how he didn't necessarily think big, but he kind of knew it was all going to be big because he just kept parlaying one year to the next to the thing. And it was the snowball. The whole point of it is he built a snowball over decades. And
yeah.
I got really, really hit by that. I started crying. I was talking to my wife. I was like, I need to set my sights. I'm kind of being lazy was not the word, but it's like complacent, like an opportunity cost here that I could be something great. I could be a lot more
Mm,
than I am today. And I'm not really doing much, and my aspirations are too low. And I was really convicted by that book. And it made me, within a year, I I basically acquired and then grew a small SaaS to 10 times larger than anything I'd ever done. And then I sold it, and then I started Drip, and I built that to 10 times larger than the prior one. And that became my thing. Now, do you need to 10x yourself every 2 years? That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that part of the snowball's transformation in me was write a book, because I wrote a book the next year. That I started MicroConf the next year. I started the podcast that year. I acquired that app. So it like really spurred me to like become more of who I am today than I was back then, which was kind of just like, I want to make some money and I want to be a lifestyle business, which is fine. But I had something bigger in me, and it
yeah.
helped unlock that for me, the realization.
That's super powerful. The way you talk about that book is what I'm talking about a book's job is. It's not the contents in it. The contents in it to do that one thing, whatever that thing is for the reader. And it may be different for every reader, but that thing is what I try to encourage authors to look for. I go, it's the same problem people have when they come to me when I ask about TEDx speaking. I said, you're thinking about this as like a performance or something. Remember, it's an idea we're spreading. And if you don't have one, you don't have no business doing a TEDx
Mm-hmm.
because we don't need more information about why you think this or that. We want to, I want to be moved by something it was in my life every day and I just didn't notice. I just wasn't paying attention enough to notice. That's what that kid did to me when he said, well, you should write a book anyways. Well, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, damn it. That
Mm-hmm.
same feeling is what I want a book to do for a reader. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care how well you write it. Editors can make it better. But if you're not true and honest, what you're going to have there is a book that's really well written and that's it. And not one of those movement making conversations that
Mm-hmm.
someone else like you and I are having and people will be having after he's gone because of that. And that's to me long lasting impact. So much that I have never written a book for myself. Ironically, I wrote it for another creative, a book about writing. I wrote their book about writing. But I think what I notice is 10 years into this coaching, I'm barely understanding what it is that's a book and it has nothing to do with the words. So if I wrote a book about writing, it would have nothing to do about writing. It would be about the thing that's other than writing that you're
Yeah.
missing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's powerful about a book. What would you hope your book, your next book does? What are you looking for it to do? Will it serve you in a new way, or is there something exciting that brought it to you besides that friend who asked you to? Like, what are you hoping for?
It fills a gap that I have in my books. It answers common questions. That's for me. I have that feedback loop. So it isn't divine inspiration that I just came up with the idea. It's I've covered certain stages of starting up, and I specifically have left out the kind of the early stage of SaaS. Because Start Small, Stay
Yeah,
Small was 15 years ago. It was before I was really doing a lot of SaaS. So it kind of talks about all types of products. SaaS Playbook, which came out a couple years ago, and is my best-selling book to date. It starts when you already you have a product with revenue and it kind of takes you from there. But there's this earlier stage that is really murky. And it's like, how do I come up with ideas? How do I know if an idea is any good? How do I maybe vet or validate? How do I research an idea? How do I put up a landing page? How do I build a launch list? How do I launch? How do I build a product? How do I write all that stuff? I have not written that about SaaS. And a lot of people, it's the biggest part of the audience because it's the aspiring, right? So that's what the next book is. And so I don't know if it will, I don't know if it'll take me in new directions, but it is, my goals are to create things that a lot of people consume and enjoy and provide value and help them. And that's really what I hope it does.
I have a feeling that it'll be the best selling book because it is the one that most people are waiting in.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I have that sense about that. The topic you mentioned, because the majority of your audience is lurking quietly,
Yeah.
hoping to have the conversations you're having with your guests, hoping they'll be ready for the books, but they're still way, in their mind, way far away.
Yeah.
And I think you're the right guide because you make it feel possible without it being ridiculously complicated. It's really specific. These are the metrics. Like, I think that's going to do wildly well. And I'm really grateful that I want to share that book when it comes out for sure.
Thank you.
What would you say to people who are quietly listening right now, thinking about they have a topic they've been told
Mhm.
they're great at, or they run a business and they've been told they should share? What's your advice to them?
I like to get things. I think more people should get things into the public eye sooner. I think people should, if you're a writer, or if you're not a writer, and you are thinking, hey, I have ideas that should be in a book. I think you should start writing and publishing, whether it's on Medium or whether it's in Beehive, Substack, or your own blog. I prefer to own all of my own stuff, so it's always robwalling.com. I don't like
Yeah,
using third-party things I can't get my own traffic to. Um, because you don't know if it's going to resonate. You don't want to go in a basement for 12 months and write a book and then come out and be like, hey, everybody, I had this idea. Like that's the worst startup founders or the worst startup ideas, I'm sorry, are the ones that people take and run with for 12 months without telling anyone. You have to talk
yeah,
to end users. And not just because I did it, right? I started blogging. I did not really intend to write a book. Eventually I was like, oh, I need to write a book. Not just because I did it, but because it's scary pushing stuff to the internet. It's scary putting your thoughts out there when people can attack them. But more likely than not, no one will attack them. They'll just ignore them. And that sucks too, right? So I think
yeah,
getting some stuff out into the public is worthwhile. Now, maybe if you're more of a talker, let's say you're not a writer, and you do think, hey, I want to write a book with a ghostwriter, which I've done twice, I think. Yeah, it kind of depends on how you. Um, Coming back to your thing of ideas being more important than the content itself. That's what I finally had to come to grips with. Is that because I consider myself a writer from way back, right? I write songs, I write fiction, I write nonfiction. I really struggled to admit to myself that I just didn't have the time to write a book. And in fact, my last basically 2.5 books wouldn't exist if I had not worked with a writing coach / ghostwriter. But if, let's say, you're not a writer, but you do think you want to write a book eventually, what I would do, probably start a podcast or a YouTube channel. And I would start talking the ideas through in that form, because a blog post is kind of equivalent to a solo podcast episode. They're very similar. It's one person's opinions and thoughts, as long as it's well structured and stuff and you're not rambling. I mean, the SaaS Playbook is a collection of a lot of different things. There's a lot of YouTube videos I recorded that I basically gave that video or the podcast episode or a forum response that I had left on Indie Hackers or on my own microconf forums to someone's question. I had left a long response, pasted it into a Google Doc. I would give those to my writer and writing coach and say, that's the chapter on pricing. That's a chapter. So a lot of the stuff in the SaaS Playbook started as not written words. One of them, actually, the entire pricing chapter, most of it was a conference talk I gave at MicroConf at my own event. And I did a 40-minute talk. And I was like, this is kind of not everything, but this is 90% of what I know about SaaS pricing. And I gave that to the writer and I said, make that the chapter. And that's probably 80% of that chapter is just a talk I gave. So that's what I would encourage is you don't have to be a writer to write a book. Like, you can be a thinker. You can be a talker. I mean, I talk to my ghostwriter. I record things and then that winds up in the book. Now I edit, I put it in I want it to sound like I said it. Sometimes she writes phrases that I wouldn't use and stuff. So I get a little picky about that. But anyways, that was kind of a long answer to
That's a great answer. And I want everyone to hear that writing. I'm a dyslexic person, so man, if I didn't have tools to help, it would be difficult. I don't want people to think that you can't do this. If this kid that couldn't read at 3rd grade and flunked freshman English at UCLA is a writing coach, writing books, helping people, that you can do it too. Where would they go, Rob, to find more about you and buy all of your books?
robwalling.com. And that'll get people, there's links there there's all my books. And of course, if you're, listening to this as a podcast, I podcast every week and have since 2010. It's startupsfortherestofus.com.
Yeah, it's amazing. Rob, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope everyone's inspired. I want to go write something, which is really odd. I don't usually end my podcast with wanting that, but thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom with us.
It's been my pleasure.